Why do we as car enthusiasts hate automatic gearboxes so much? And is it justified? Let's find out. If you've spent even a moment on the internet as a car enthusiast, you'll know that automatic transmissions are a big no-no, and you need a manual transmission for the pure driving enjoyment. But is that actually the case? Or are we all just buying into hype? For this video, you join me in my Audi S6, a car that literally everyone on the internet and their grandmother knows is automatic because I've been telling them so for the last 2 years, saying that I'm going to go manual swapping this car. However, now is kind of finally the time. From tomorrow, this car is declared off the road, meaning I hopefully have about a month's time to get this car finally manual swapped. And at the moment, we're going to bring it to where that's going to happen. Before I get properly into my thoughts on this video, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think pretty much all cars should be manual, and if you're a car enthusiast, you should only be driving manual? Or are you the opposite? Do you think everything should be auto and prefer auto? Let me know and explain your reasoning below, because it'll be quite interesting to see what the general consensus is like, and if that changes depending on like the age of the car or the type of the car as well. Oh, and like, share, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and please don't follow or subscribe if you don't like old school and classic cars like this, even if it is auto. I guess the best way to describe why car enthusiasts hate automatic gearboxes is because it takes away the feeling of control. We, in this modern world, feel like we need as much control as possible, and whoever spec'd these cars back in the 90s and wanted the extra luxury of automatic gearboxes, we kind of don't respect them as much. They should have gone for the manual instead. It's the that kind of gets me. It's a bit depressing, to be fair. At least it somewhat flutters though. But one of the reasons that car enthusiasts seem to not like them as much is just because they feel like they take away control from the driver. And I can kind of attest to that. This car is a 4-speed automatic. It's a slush box, meaning it's a traditional torque converter automatic. It's not the worst. There are definitely a lot worse 90s gearbox and a lot worse automatic gearboxes before that, but I don't think it suits this engine, and I don't think it suits this car. The engine in front of me is a 2.2 5-cylinder turbo, which should make all of the Group B quattro noises, and instead it kind of just moans along, which I don't love. So that's one of the big reasons why this car is going to go getting a 6-speed manual gearbox instead of this 4-speed auto. But you can do a couple of things with this gearbox. You can kick it down, so that's 3, 2, and then if I wanted, I could punch it. And it doesn't sound too bad, but I know how good the potential of how good this engine could sound really is. But the big issue is it feels like you're constantly like pressing on a balloon. Everything you do, and especially in a turbo car, you've two kind of delays. One, you have the turbo lag, but before that you even have the transmission lag, which you're kind of pushing and you're kind of hoping it does something. And the idea is that an automatic transmission makes your life easier. It means you don't have to shift gears, you don't have to think much about it, and if you want, you can. If you want to just boot it, well, you can. As such, and I didn't have to move my left hand at all. So for that way, it's a good thing, which is also why throughout the 70s, 80s and 90s, and even into the 2000s, it was very much seen as a luxury. As in the case of this car, the S6 was already a luxury car, but the automatic transmission versions were about the equivalent of about €3,000 more expensive, because they had more complexity to them, and at the time especially, automatic was seen as luxury because you had to do less yourself, meaning, well, luxury, I guess. Nowadays, unfortunately, automatic gearboxes have become commonplace, and it kind of makes sense because, well, as car brands have developed and as we as a society have developed as well, people want cars that feel more premium and more luxurious. Add into that sustainability targets such as the environmental targets for emissions, well, that means it's really difficult to actually get a manual gearbox through emissions regulations. That's why you see cars such as the Golf GTI, Golf 4, and pretty much all performance cars now, they're pretty much all automatic now. The luxury reason is also the same reason why you'll probably never find a manual Bentley or a Rolls Royce that's left the factory like that. You know, these were luxury cars, and automatics were a luxury option. You didn't want to have to go moving around, shifting gears. You wanted the smoothest possible drive that you could have, and an automatic, at the time at least, offered that. It's kind of hard to believe, however, that automatics were the luxury, when nowadays, when it comes to collector market, pretty much everyone pays a higher premium or demands a higher premium for the manual version of some iconic cars, and even some lesser iconic cars. For example, I bought this very car because I wanted an S6. I wanted something with a 5-cylinder turbo. However, trying to find one in Ireland, where the roads are this bad, was already a tough task, and trying to find a nice one and a clean one in Ireland that is manual was an impossible task. So I settled on this and said, you know what, I'll take a Europa blue car that has all this spec, that is like this, and I'll go to the effort of manual swapping it one day because, well, I don't really care about the resale value as much because this is probably going to be a forever car. And in the case of me buying the RS4 a couple of weeks ago as well, that's also an automatic. Again, maybe I should have tried looking for a manual one, but I would have paid a lot more money and I probably wouldn't have even found one. On roads like this, on long drives, automatic gearboxes don't really make much of a difference because, well, I'd be sitting in sixth anyway. At least this way I just don't need to shift gears at all if I kind of come to slow down or come to traffic. Likewise for cities. For cities, automatics are pretty good because, well, when you're stuck in traffic, at least you don't need to constantly be rolling through the gears. It's the back roads though, that's where they make the most difference. Because of the spongy nature of the torque converter in cars like this, it removes a lot of control that you feel like you should have over a car like this. Hence why manual swapping it. And when this car is manual swapped, it should be a much nicer car. There's also a couple of other reasons. If I go for power upgrades, well, there's only so much that an old automatic gearbox can hold, whereas the manual versions, well, they can hold a lot more power. And if you have a 5-cylinder turbo under the bonnet, you are going to want to do turbo work at some point. And as soon as the manual is done, well, I'm going to do the same. Just because I have one opinion of automatics from this era doesn't mean that automatically translates to all eras. See, this is a 4-speed auto slush box from the 90s. You know, it kind of, it's lazy. It's lazy, and especially Mercedes gearboxes from that era, also incredibly lazy. However, some of the gearboxes that started coming out towards the end of the 2000s were, they're pretty good. Stuff like the DSG gearbox in the original Mark V GTI and onwards is one of the best automatic gearboxes you can have. Well, aside from the Porsche PDK. And even though I'm a car enthusiast, if I was buying something like a modern Golf GTI, modern Golf 4, or something like a GT3, I'd find it pretty tough to actually spec one in a manual because, well, the gearbox is one of the best parts about those cars, and I think that's nothing to shy away for or to be ashamed about. The PDK gearbox in the 911 GT3 is blisteringly quick. I think if I had something like a Carrera or something along those lines, something a little bit lesser in the Porsche lineup, I'd probably go manual. But when it comes to the PDK that's in the GT3s, Jesus Christ, they are some of the best gearboxes ever, and the idea of just flapping around the paddles, having a great time while there's a flat 6 roaring behind you, especially if it's going through like a cup exhaust or something like that, is just pure and utter heaven. I'm getting excited just thinking about it. Likewise, a Golf GTI, especially anything after a Mark V, really comes to life with a DSG. If it's before a Mark V, give me a manual any day of the week, but after the Mark V, those DSG dual clutch gearboxes are just so bloody good. You know, it's kind of hard to go back to the manual version afterwards. I've spent a good bit of time recently with the Mark 8.5 GTI, should I say. What a brilliant car it is. Even the Golf 4, brilliant car with that gearbox. Take the gearbox away and it becomes a very different car. And I experienced that when I was on the Skoda Octavia RS press launch, because they had a previous generation manual car. And it was an incredibly cool car to drive, but it just felt kind of wrong. And I think that's kind of one of the things about the modern cars, because everything is so snappy and so quick, it's kind of tough not to want to kind of make use of that with technology such as the flappy paddles, the DSGs and the PDKs of this world. There's also two other sides to automatics. One is it's a lot easier for a manufacturer to build an automatic to handle high power than it is for them to make a manual gearbox. You know, they have a lot more control over how the torque gets delivered, and you can't just clutch dump it and break everything. So that's why you see the likes of the C6 RS6 coming as an automatic only, and every RS6 since the C5, since the successor of this car, all of them have been automatic only because of the big engines. Likewise, I think M5, since I think the E60 was probably the last manual M5 you could get, because the E60 M5 with the V10, that made perfect sense having that manual, because it's a very natural, it's a very raw engine, and you kind of want to have as much connection with that as possible. The engines that came afterwards, the turbocharged engines, you know, for them it makes a lot more sense to kind of, I guess, try to get as much of that power down onto the road in a way that makes sense. You don't need the complete mechanical you know, link from the engine back to the wheels. I think for a lot of us we'd like that, but it doesn't necessarily mean it makes sense. A buddy of mine, Jamie, has an M2 competition, a car that you typically only see as an automatic with the flappy paddles is at the DCT gearbox. However, his one is a manual. And I think for that, for some reason, it kind of just makes sense. It feels like almost like an old school Supra, but the quicker car on track is probably still the M2 Comp with the DCT gearbox. So you kind of have a trade-off. You either want the raw feel and you enjoy the raw feel, or you just want what's quickest and what's easiest. And there's a very strange elitism going around the world of enthusiast cars or car enthusiasts when it comes to automatic versus manual, thinking that manual is the way to go. Manual is the better option 10 times out of 10. There's cars that I would not like to drive as a manual. You know, some of the big Mercedes, I do not want to drive them as a manual. Luxury barges like an S-Class, an A8, do those make sense as a manual? Probably not. This car, I think it makes sense as both. I think for what I want out of this car, it makes more sense as a manual because I'll have a lot more control and I can, you know, have fun with it. And the car we're going to collect is my Coupe Quattro that is very manual. And my opinion on this whole thing might change as soon as I go collect that car. There are certain types of cars, however, that I think are better either as an automatic or as a manual. For example, one of the big reasons that here in Europe we have so many manual cars is because pretty much all economy cars over here are manual because it's a lot cheaper to make a manual. Even a couple of years ago, my grandparents had a car for their business where it was a Citroen C1 that was an automatic, but essentially it was just a electronically controlled manual. It was as simple as it gets, and I think it cost like $1,000 extra. It wasn't a torque converter, it wasn't a DSG or anything like that. It was literally just an electronically controlled manual, which is mad because the gearbox itself then is technically a manual as well. Basically, servo motors controlled the clutch and also moving the gear. But in America, pretty much all cars are automatic. But strangely enough, the car I'm sat in, the S6, never came automatic in the US. And I think I know why. When the Audi 5000, which would have been the Audi 100/Audi 200 here in Europe, was sold in America during the 1980s, they had this big suit of lawsuits because of unintended acceleration. And they were claiming that the car was accelerating itself. What was actually happening was the Americans, having just two pedals, pressed on the wrong pedal. When they thought they were braking, they were accelerating. From then on, Audi was like, no, you're not getting just two pedals anymore. We're going to give you three. So for about like 10, 15 years, pretty much all Audis, especially of this kind of shape, I think Audi A8s did get automatics over there, but all of the C4 chassis cars all got manual gearboxes only, which I think is quite a funny little thing. And it was kind of like Audi just said, hey, look, we tried giving you just two pedals before and you didn't do it right and you blamed us. So therefore you're just getting three pedals from now on. Yeah, we tried giving you the two pedals and you blame us for it and you say that we were the problem. So therefore, from now on you only get drei Pedale, no two pedal. And look, they probably did do automatics in some cars. I just find it funny that for one of their flagships, in the US, the land of the automatic gearbox, they didn't do an automatic version. It sounds a bit petty to me. This is where I hate automatic gearboxes, especially with an exhaust. I'm not fully on throttle because I don't want to be. I don't want to be screaming here, but it's when the gearbox doesn't do what you want. Like, just shift up, there we go. That's where autos have their downside. This is the other downside, going up long hills. It sounds like I'm driving a truck. I just wanted to shift up, but it won't. At least it somewhat flutters though. So let me know, are you only interested in manual cars, or do you see a bit of space for some automatic cars in the world? And also, please don't follow or subscribe to Retro Garage if you don't like old school and classic cars, even if they are auto, like this. We'll see you as always in the next video. Cheers, take care, bye bye.